She wants a young American. It's all right. She wants a young American.
Keanan, it's now 7 weeks after the convention. I missed to interview you there, so we do now have a chat through the internet. What is your impression of the past convention?
The Bowie convention in Liverpool was fantastic. It was a great convergence of fans of all ages and all generations of Bowie too, from all over the world. So a great global community coming together in a town that's so historic for music in the UK, obviously the birthplace of the Beatles. But so many bands that came out of Liverpool have been really influenced by David Bowie over the years, whether it's the Echo and the Bunnymen, Teardrop Explodes, Dead or Alive, Frankie Goes to Hollywood. The list goes on and on. So it's a very great heritage for music. And the convention itself in St. George's Hall was fabulous. The venue is fantastic. It's in the latest Batman movie, as we know. It's a historic environment. It was great for all of the wonderful speakers that were at the show: Carlos Alomar, Ava Cherry, Hannah, Space Cadet, everybody that was there. It was fantastic. Kevin Armstrong and many more. I was very thrilled and honored to be part of it. And I think it was a truly wonderful global community of Bowie fans.
You collaborated in 2007 with David on a fashion collection. Can you describe in detail what happened there?
Well, in the early 2000s, I had been in contact with Bill Zisblatt, who is David's long-term business manager, tour manager, and so on, manager of all aspects of David's business enterprises. I contacted Bill because I wanted to pitch to do tour merchandise, so T-shirts, totes, and all the stuff that's sold on tour. As David was touring. But when I pitched this to Bill, it was during the reality tour. And as we all know, David had a health issue towards the end of that tour, which abruptly cut the tour short and actually ended his touring life. He didn't want to tour again after that and only did sporadic individual shows. So my idea kind of came to nothing. But subsequently, in 2006, I was very grateful and honored to launch a collection with a retailer in the US called Target. And my clothes were going into hundreds and hundreds of stores all across the US. So I went back to Bill at this point and I said to him, would there be any interest from David in collaborating on a fashion collection for Target? It would be a limited edition, so it would be in store for a limited time, but it would be in a lot of stores. And so Bill said, well, David might be intrigued by this. Why don't you come up to my office and meet with him and pitch it to him? So I went up to 57th Street, which is where Ozio offices were at that time. I believe they're still there. And Bill brought me into a huge boardroom, which was very imposing and scary. Wood paneled walls, the very sort of typical corporate boardroom. And I sat in the middle of a very long table and waited and waited and waited for about sort of 15, 20 minutes, the obligatory amount of time that you wait for someone, a global superstar of David's stature. And eventually, after that time, the door opened and in walked Mr. David Jones and Miss Coco Schwab. And they came in and sat down. And David said to me, "What's all this about clothes then? What are you up to? What do you have in mind?" So I said, "Well, I've got an idea and I want to share it with you and see if there's an interest." And so he said to me, "Okay, well, go and sit at the head of the table. Sit in the big chair. You can pitch from there. This is your meeting. You'll lead the meeting." So I went and sat in the big chair and pitched my idea to David, which was to create this fashion line. As I actually rambled on and on, as I'm doing now, I kind of lost where I was in the conversation. And I said to David, "Oh, I'm sorry, give me a second. I've lost my thread." And he said to me, "Oh, well, that's not very good for a fashion designer, is it?" So he was very humorous, very down to earth. And I kind of met David Jones that day, not David Bowie. He wasn't acting like the global superstar that he is. He was kind of being very down to earth and disarming. As many superstars are, he made it feel that it wasn't weird that a huge fan was in the room, same room as this amazing icon. And so I pitched the idea to him. He said, "Oh, that sounds interesting. Have you told Target about this yet?" And I said, "No. I wanted to come to you and get your blessing to move forward." And at that point, I think he felt some trust between us, because I wasn't using his name to further my own ends. So he gave me his blessing, and he said, "So what's next?" And I said, "Well, I'll fly to Minneapolis, which is where Target is based." And he said to me, "Oh, you should look up Prince while you're there." And so I didn't do that, but I flew out to Target and I pitched the idea to them. And because I didn't have any designs or clothes or anything ready at that stage, I went to Minneapolis with all of David's albums, vinyl albums, and with a little record player that I bought in Japan, a little plastic portable record player. And I had all of the buying team assembled in another boardroom there. And I said, "I want to bring a global superstar to Target in a fashion collaboration." I didn't say David's name. I just put on the track "Let's Dance" because I figured that's the one that everybody would know. I put that on and I started laying the album sleeves on the table. And before I got to, I started with the first album, and then, moved through Hunky Dory and Ziggy Stardust. I think by the time I got to Ziggy Stardust, maybe, or Man Who Sold the World or something like that, they said, "Stop, stop, stop. This is brilliant. David Bowie. Wow. You got to do this again. We have to get the president of Target, not of the US. And we have to get the president, and you have to do this presentation again. This is so fantastic." So obviously the second time is not as impactful. But I did it again and got the thumbs up from Target. So we were engaged and ready to go. So then came back to New York, which is where I'm based, and met again with David and told him the good news. And then we began the process of collaborating together on this collection, which took about 9 months in total. We started, the first meeting was on December the 16th, I think, in 2006. And then the collection delivered into store in October of the next year, because it takes about sort of 6 months to produce and manufacture a collection overseas, land it into the US, and so on. So the whole process in total ended up being 9 months to produce, design, distribute the collection, and then a few months after that, when it was in store, doing subsequent promotion. So it was a fabulous experience. And David was an extremely generous collaborator.
My last question to you is, Keanan, you have been a fan before that meeting of him. And what is your Bowie story?
I have a number of Bowie stories. One that I really love is in Jimmy King, who was David's stylist, archivist, photographer, and who I know well and have known well since the 90s. Jimmy used to borrow clothes from my showroom, which was in the 90s and the 2000s, was on Broadway in Soho in New York. And he used to borrow clothes occasionally for David and for the band. And David did a show, which I think was the Roseland show in 2000. And a shirt that I designed, which is a deep red, like a wine colored shirt with a very, very dark St. George cross sewn into it. It had actually been borrowed from Mark Platty, and it was hanging on a rack. I know this story from Jimmy King. It was hanging on a rack backstage. Mark hadn't worn it for the show, and David came off stage and he was kind of, dripping in sweat and soaking. And so he wanted something to wear for a meet and greet with the media, because Iman was there and they were going to be photographed together. And Iman was very close to Lexi's birth. So Iman was very pregnant. And so David grabbed the shirt and put it on. And he was photographed with Iman by Kevin Mazur, which was published in Rolling Stone and many, many magazines. It's a beautiful photograph because it's really the eve of the birth of Lexi. So David and Iman are going into a new phase in their lives. But it was also, I believe, before Glastonbury. So it was the kind of rebirth of David as a legendary artist. Not that he wasn't ever a legendary artist, but he kind of stepped away from doing his back catalogue for many years. And at Glastonbury, he fully embraced all those old songs again. So it was kind of almost a rebirth, a birth of their child, and a rebirth of David's the David Bowie persona, let's say. And so that photograph, I have a print of it. Kevin gave me a print of it. And that means a lot to me because it's David obviously wearing something that I designed. And I don't have that shirt, but I have one of those shirts, which I wore at the Bowie convention from the same collection. But it's something that I cherish as a memory that I'll always cherish because it's my work intersecting with David at a moment when it was a new era in his life and in Iman's life and in their life as a family. So I think that's my favorite Bowie story, but I have many others.
Keanan, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
It's all right. She wants a young American.